My name is Aaliyah. And until very recently I believed in only one thing: certainty. I lived in the black and white of textbooks. I breathed the language of pathology, of diagnosis, of verifiable fact. I was a medical resident in the heart of one of the best hospitals in the world. My altar wasn't in a mosque or a church. It was in the lab under the blinding fluorescent lights. It was in the certainty that if I understood the mechanism I could fix the problem. And if I couldn't fix it, it was simply an endpoint. A final, natural conclusion to a measurable equation. I saw spiritual people who prayed for healing, and I felt kind of pity. A gentle intellectual arrogance. Why ask for magic when you can learn the science? I saw faith as a beautiful form of denial. A comfort blanket for those who couldn't handle the harsh reality of molecular biology. I was certain that I was the master of my domain. I was the one with the answers. And then I met the impossible. And the entire structure of my certainty shattered. It was a Monday morning rotation in neuro-oncology. Our patient was an 8-year-old girl. Let's call her Sarah. She was vibrant, full of that relentless, pure energy that only children possess. But Sarah had a monster in her brain. A massive, inoperable tumor. A grade 4 glioma. Dr. Thompson and I reviewed the scans countless times. It was textbook devastating. It was located in the brainstem, infiltrating critical structures. Radiation and chemotherapy were Hail Marys, really. We knew statistically, logically, the prognosis. I could recite the survival rate percentage like my own phone number. My job was to present the facts to the parents. To prepare them for the inevitable decline. I remember looking at her mother, Miriam, who just kept stroking Sarah's hair and whispering prayers. I felt that familiar condescension rise up in me. "Ma'am," I said, "we need to focus on measurable outcomes. We need to be realistic about the data." Miriam simply smiled, a deep, tired but peaceful smile. "Dr. Aaliyah," she said softly, "we are realistic. We know the doctor's data. But my daughter has another doctor." That comment stayed with me. It felt naive. It felt painfully, stubbornly unscientific. Over the next 2 weeks, Sarah's condition deteriorated exactly as predicted by the Kaplan-Meier curve. Headaches, vomiting, loss of coordination. The tumor was relentless. We performed a new MRI. I was the first to review the results on the imaging workstation. I stared at the screen, confirming what I already knew. The tumor had progressed rapidly. It was bigger. More aggressive. It was pressing hard against the pons. I felt that hollow, professional resignation. Another lost fight. I wrote the summary for Dr. Thompson. Rapid progression. Palliative care discussion recommended. Later that evening, Miriam asked if she could bring in a small group to pray beside Sarah's bed. Hospital policy technically forbids it, but the nurse on duty, a kind older woman, quietly allowed it. I was doing paperwork across the hall. I could hear the low hum of voices. Not chanting or loud singing. Just sincere, quiet pleading. I found it mildly irritating. A distraction from the real work. I pushed the sound out and went back to my research papers. Trying to find a long-shot trial, a chemical combination. Anything that would adhere to my world of quantifiable intervention. But the data was clear. The human body was failing. The statistics were unforgiving. It was 3 days after the second scan. The night shift. I was utterly exhausted. I walked into Sarah's room to check her vitals. The room was silent. The machines were steady, but her breathing was shallow and ragged. Miriam was asleep in the chair, holding Sarah's small hand. I looked down at this little girl. She looked so fragile. So defeated by biology. In that moment, all my arrogance vanished. It wasn't a professional loss. It felt personal. I, Aaliyah, the one who worshipped knowledge, the one who believed she could fix anything with enough effort, was utterly powerless. The science had run its course. The textbooks were blank. I leaned against the wall, and for the first time in years, I felt a deep, profound fear. Not for my career, but for the limit of my own understanding. I didn't pray, not exactly. I didn't know how to pray anymore. But I closed my eyes and whispered, not to God, but to the vastness I couldn't control. If there is anything bigger than the tumor, anything bigger than the textbook, please. It was a plea born of pure, distilled helplessness. A surrender of the intellect. It was the loneliest prayer I had ever made. The next day something changed. Subtly at first. Sarah was awake. She asked for a popsicle. She was tired, but the headaches were gone. Placebo effect, I immediately told myself. Transient improvement. But Dr. Thompson, ever the pragmatist, decided to order a follow-up scan. Just to confirm the worst. I wheeled Sarah down myself. I watched the screen as the MRI technician worked. The moment the images loaded, the air left my lungs. I thought the machine was malfunctioning. I thought the technician had pulled up the wrong patient file. I zoomed in. I checked the patient ID 3 times. It was Sarah's file. And where the massive, aggressive, inoperable grade 4 glioma had been. There was nothing. Not a scar. Not a shadow. Not a residual mass. The brainstem was clean. The architecture was intact. It was like the tumor had simply dissolved. I walked straight to Dr. Thompson's office, my hand shaking so violently I dropped the file on the floor. "Sir," I whispered, "you need to see this." Dr. Thompson is a man who deals only in hard facts. He stared at the old scan, then the new one. He ordered a second scan immediately from a different machine run by a different tech. The result was the same. We spent the next 48 hours reviewing everything. Blood work, charting, drug administration. Had she been accidentally enrolled in a secret trial? No. Had the first set of scans been misread? Impossible, they were peer-reviewed. Had we misidentified the tumor type? Biopsy confirmed the grade. There was no scientific mechanism. There was no documented case of a grade 4 glioma spontaneously regressing to 0 without surgical intervention or targeted treatment. It simply did not happen. I felt like I was watching an equation where 2 plus 2 suddenly equaled 10,000. I was frantic. I was angry at the universe for breaking its own rules. I wanted the why. I needed the how. I went to the literature. I scoured every database. I searched for articles about spontaneous complete regression. I found a handful of anecdotal reports, usually dismissed by the medical community as statistical anomalies, or simply errors in diagnosis. But this was no error. I had seen the beast on the film myself. It was gone. And science had no answer. I sat down with Dr. Thompson in a quiet meeting room. He looked defeated, not angry. Just weary. "Aaliyah," he said, rubbing his temples. "I'm going to write this up as an unexplained complete remission. I have to. I cannot write that a tumor simply evaporated. It's medically unsound." He was trying to fit the impossible into the possible. And that's when it hit me. My entire life had been spent closing the gap between what I knew and what was real. But this event created a gap that no amount of knowledge could bridge. I thought back to Sarah's mother, Miriam. "My daughter has another doctor." I suddenly understood the gentle peace in her eyes. It wasn't denial. It was trust. She had surrendered to a reality that existed outside the hospital walls. A reality where certainty isn't found in statistics but in surrender. I realized my arrogance hadn't been about being smart. It had been about believing that my intellect was the limit of all possibility. It was the most humbling moment of my life. I hadn't just witnessed a healing. I had witnessed the hand of the Creator reaching through the veil of my own understanding. And it had slapped the textbook right out of my hand. Sarah was discharged a week later. Perfectly healthy. Running down the hall. She gave me a drawing of a smiling sun and a doctor with wings. I still have it. I still work in medicine. I still worship knowledge. But it's different now. The why of her healing never came. I still can't explain it. And I have finally found peace in that lack of explanation. My job is to use every tool, every piece of knowledge, every scientific miracle given to us. But when I reach the end of the data, I stop. I stop trying to force the impossible into a neat, measurable category. I acknowledge the limit of my own beautiful, flawed human understanding. And I remember that there is an entire dimension of reality that exists purely on trust. I learned that science is not the enemy of faith. It is simply the map of the lower mountains. And sometimes when the map ends, you have to look up and trust that the one who created the entire landscape is still leading the way. It took a little girl, a broken body, and a dissolved tumor for me to finally stop seeing the world through a microscope and start seeing it through a window.